Story 1. A single clean child's sock appeared on my pillow one morning. I do not have children and I live alone. Story 2. Not gonna lie, one time my Alexa just started playing a super old random song in the middle of the night. I did not ask it to play anything and I still have no idea why it happened. Story 3. This is a perfect time to talk about the magical wrench. The wrench disappeared for 6 months and then just reappeared. That is a gross oversimplification. My mother and I were moving into a new apartment with some new furniture that needed to be assembled. We decided to move the new items in first to have enough room to put them together without issue. The apartment had bare walls and carpet, except for the few kits being assembled. You know that reflex where you grab something before it hits the floor? Well, this fancy iron and wood display shelf was assembled, and the adjustable crescent wrench was sitting on the main platform when we decided to move the shelf to make room for the next item. The wrench slipped off. No big deal since the floor was carpeted. As a reflex, I shot my hand out to catch it before it hit the floor and I missed. "Where did it go?" she asked before I could say anything. I thought I missed the catch, but it never hit the floor. It never landed anywhere. The room was completely empty. We had not even unpacked the parts in that room yet. Bare walls, carpet, the display shelf, and a few related tools. Now one adjustable wrench was missing. We looked everywhere, utterly confused. It was so strange that we stopped to ponder what had just happened, trying to figure out how or why. We really needed that wrench. No luck was found, so we had to get a new wrench. Life goes on. About 6 months later, we had long since moved in and were living in the space. The room in question is the living room. It now has a couch, a TV, a coffee table with a glass top, some display and bookshelves, and other usual living room items. We were watching TV. Then the wrench finally finished falling to the floor and broke the glass top on the coffee table right in front of us. We were both looking at the same spot near the TV, when suddenly, crash! It landed exactly where it would have landed 6 months ago. Needless to say, nobody believed us. My mother's solution was to never talk about it again and pretend it never happened. I suspect weird things like this have happened around her before, and she has experienced the "you are lying" or crazy routine, so she just keeps quiet. Story 4. My childhood home always felt like someone else was there, just hanging out in the shadows. Growing up, I never slept with my back to the door and always slept with the door open because it felt like someone was watching me. If the bus dropped me off from school before my parents got home, I often stood up the street and waited, even in the rain, because I didn't like the feeling. Even then, it felt like something was waiting in the driveway. One time, home alone, I swore I heard something whisper my name in my ear. After my parents' divorce and my high school graduation, the house became mine. My mother remarried and moved out. Over the years, multiple people who didn't know about it claimed they felt like someone else had been in the room with us for a bit, then realized there wasn't when they looked. We were the only ones in the house. I had a friend house sit and watch my dogs for a few days. He refused to ever do it again because of how creepy it felt to be there alone. My parents had the house built when I was a year old, and we were the only ones to have lived there. Maybe something happened on the land beforehand, but I will likely never know. Story 5. I have told this story before. It is not exciting, but it is certain. I was cleaning the house I was moving out of. At one point, I finished a bottle of Gatorade. Being lazy, I threw the bottle down the stairs and went back to cleaning. But I kept having the thought that maybe it was at the bottom of the stairs and I would step on it and hurt myself. So I thought, fine, I will get it and throw it in the recycling. It was not there. It was nowhere. The thing is, I had already moved out and the house was completely empty. I cleaned every single flat surface. Floors, counters, shelves, and the bottle never showed up. No one else was in the house. Doors were locked. Windows closed. It is not exciting, but the bottle disappeared under near-laboratory conditions. Story 6. My husband and I have lived in our house for years. We are not the first owners. One family lived in it before us, and my husband lived here alone for a couple of years before I moved in 2021. The house has always had some strange, inexplicable things happening that make us joke that it is haunted, though many of these instances could theoretically be explained. However, there is one that, in our opinion, cannot be explained. A few months ago, I came home and was taking off my shoes when I noticed something in the downstairs bathroom. There is a clear view into that bathroom from the front door, and it looked like there was something on the toilet. I went to check, and sure enough, there was a small black and white manufacturer sticker on the front of the toilet tank. We are both completely certain that this toilet never had a sticker on it before. We even texted my husband's cousin, who lived with us for about a year and used that bathroom more than we did, and she said she did not remember any sticker. One of the strangest things is that after it happened, I searched online and found that this has happened to other people with other appliances as well. Obviously, it is possible the sticker had always been there and none of us noticed it, but I do not believe that is the case. I noticed it immediately from across the hallway, and though it was not very large, it was not nearly small enough to have been missed in such a conspicuous spot for years. Story 7. This happened about a year ago. Both my partner and I were working from home. I was working downstairs, and he was upstairs in the spare bedroom office. I finished work around 4:30 p.m. and went into the kitchen to clean and prepare dinner. I heard him walk behind me, cross the dining room, and walk upstairs. I assumed he had been in the garden having a coffee and cigarette. Immediately after hearing him reach the top of the stairs, he walked back down and into the kitchen. At the same time, I asked him what he had forgotten, just as he was asking me what I was doing in the kitchen. I told him he had just walked past me, gone upstairs, and then immediately come back down. He said he had not left his desk in a couple of hours, and the only reason he came downstairs was because he had just heard me walk up the stairs, past his office and into the bathroom. He said this prompted him to look at the time and realize he was finished work for the day, so he walked downstairs. When he saw me in the kitchen, he had no idea how I got there. I told him that I had not gone upstairs. He had. He insisted it was me. At this point, we thought there was an intruder. There was not. Neither of us has any idea what actually happened. Story 8. Not really scary or anything. In my old apartment, we had what we called the thirsty ghost. We used to find cups or glasses by the sinks that were full of water. We would know that the cups were empty earlier. I questioned my wife and kids, but they all said they were not doing it. I really thought they were playing jokes on me. My wife started finding cups too, and she also thought the kids were doing it. One day, the kids and wife went out for the day and I was home alone. I was in the kitchen and bathroom during this time and I knew the cups were empty. I sat down to watch television and after about an hour, I went to the bathroom. Right there next to the sink was the bathroom cup and it was full of water. I walked over to the kitchen and next to the sink and on the table were 2 cups, both full of water. This is all our ghost did. Just fill the cups. It was always only 1 or 2 cups, never more than that. We played it off because that was the only thing our ghost did. After about 2 years, we moved out. I sometimes wonder if the ghost is doing this to the new tenants. Story 9. Honestly, this is something I rarely talk about, even to those who also experience something paranormal in the same house. I always feel foolish telling people this and tend not to anymore. I'm still undecided about the supernatural. I have to convince myself that what I saw was a hallucination or something, because it couldn't have possibly happened by any logical explanation, but it did. Everyone else experienced the usual footsteps, odd voices, and noises. Twice in the 5 years I lived there, 2 people saw a full apparition. One being a worker who knew nothing about the history or anything supernatural. But I hadn't experienced anything except the occasional odd noise that sounded like footsteps or doors slamming. At night, we would hear doors slamming or have things fall over downstairs. It became more annoying than scary and was almost a nightly occurrence. At this point, I still thought there had to be some explanation. The house was fully tested. No gas leaks or anything were detected. There was a room that was creepy, and most of the activity happened there. I personally set up a camera and audio equipment because it happened so often I thought I would get actual proof. As soon as I set up the camera, all the activity stopped, every time, with the exception of 1 or 2 times when the camera randomly shut off and once it fell down, but that could be explained in several ways. It felt like something intelligent was causing these events and would stop when observed. The day after I gave up and removed the camera after months of inactivity, I entered the creepy room to do something. As I went to leave, A piece of furniture slid 6 feet across the floor. I leapt through the gap of the door as it slammed shut and barricaded it with me outside. After about 30 minutes, I managed to push it away and get into the room. No one was there. There were deep scrape marks on the wooden floor where the furniture had been pushed. The window was locked from the inside, and there was nowhere to hide. Even if there was, I saw the furniture move on its own. I could barely move it alone. It was so heavy. I have no explanation, and it's the most significant event that happened in that house. I moved out decades ago, but I will never be able to explain it unless every person who experienced something there was temporarily insane. After all this, I had my camera set up watching me every night while I slept, which seemed to deter it from any activity in my room. Story 10. I don't necessarily believe in ghosts, but my mom and a few of my friends claimed they saw one in my house. What's funny is they all said it was a lady. One hot summer day, I was at the personal computer playing RuneScape when I heard a woman's voice say, "I can hear you," from right behind me. Then the room got very cold. It definitely freaked me out. Another time, my uncle bought me Resident Evil 2 because I was too young. We got home late, I did my homework, and then tried to play as much of the game as I could. I got to the liquor before deciding to stop and go to bed. That night, there were heavy winds. I woke up from a nightmare about zombies. I got up and walked around the house, realizing my parents were gone. I went upstairs and even my uncle was gone. I was alone and freaking out when a huge gust of wind blew the door open. I screamed, ran back to bed, and covered myself with the blanket. I can explain it, heavy winds in a very old house, but it was still a scary experience. Story 11. When I was 19, I lived in an old raised house with another young couple. One morning, I went to the toilet, which was at the far end of the house away from the bedrooms. While I was there, I heard my housemate get up, walk down the hall, and stop outside the toilet. The wooden floorboards were very creaky, so you could hear all movement around the house. I finished in the bathroom so they could use it. Having only one bathroom in the household was inconvenient, so you always had to be mindful of others. I left the bathroom expecting to see her standing in the hall waiting, but she was not there. I went around the corner to the lounge, but it was empty. My stomach dropped when I realized my car was the only one in the driveway. I had heard someone walk down the hall and stop at the toilet door right in front of me. To this day, I have no explanation. Story 12. In the 8th grade, I had an old camcorder which was new at the time, and I was filming myself with it turned backwards towards me. I did a couple of takes, and when you played them back, the videos automatically played from one to the next. In one of the videos, you can see my bedroom door wide open, with a small gap pressed against the wall where someone could fit. An all-black figure creeps out from behind the door and quickly moves away. It was very creepy watching the videos right after I had made them, knowing that had just happened. The figure looked like it was wearing a black hooded cloak, but no skin was visible. I ran upstairs to my parents' room, and they were all there. Couldn't have been any of my family members, and the height didn't match. So, it was either an intruder right behind me or a ghost. Story 13. Sleeping in the basement, I heard a female voice say, "Name. You have to wake up. Name. You have to wake up now. Name. Get up. Get up before it's too late." This continued for about a minute, and as I was waking, the voice faded into my cat meowing at me. I was sleeping right by a window, and for some reason none of the outside lights or lights pointing towards the window were on, so it was completely pitch black. I went upstairs, informed my family, and went back to sleep, snuggling my cat who was very protective that night. Story 14. This just happened to me again. My television says I am listening, then says I cannot hear you. This happens a few times a month. I am not touching the remote, and it happens around 3 a.m. when it does. This started happening after my mother passed away. A lot of other things have happened around me since then. Story 15. Sat in bed at night with the lights off, watching the 49-inch television at the foot of my bed when suddenly something hit the back of it. I got up and walked through my flat. No intruders, the doors were locked, and the cat was asleep on the sofa. More recently, I was alone in the flat on my bed when one night something suddenly coughed loudly in my left ear. Utterly inexplicable. Story 16. Woke up to the smell of toast at 3 a.m. I live alone. I do not own a toaster. Story 17. It had never happened before or since, but 3 times during one blistering cold winter, our house banged. It is hard to describe, but it was like the house had been hit by a gigantic sledgehammer. The first time was extremely startling. I thought a huge tree had fallen on the house, like a huge impact noise. The second time was the same, and the third time even louder. All occurred during an unusual cold spell. Story 18. 20 years ago, I was living in a house in Missouri. My husband's best friend and his girlfriend were there, and my ex was at work. We were sitting in my office, playing on my computer. Suddenly, we heard what sounded like someone running up the basement stairs and the basement door slam. Then there was silence. We went to the basement door. It was locked, as usual. We opened it and slowly went down to the basement. No one was in the house or the basement. We actually moved out about a month later. I hated that house. Story 19. I was a teenager living in a house with my younger brother, mother, and grandmother. One night, around midnight, I saw a shadow on the wall in the next room, which had an open floor plan. Thinking my brother was awake, I started talking to him. The shadow suddenly jumped and ran off quickly, and I heard fast footsteps. I thought my brother was playing a trick on me. When I turned the corner, there was nothing there. I searched thoroughly and finally went through the whole house, only to find everyone asleep in their beds, including my brother. This was not the only supernatural experience I had, but it was one of the stranger ones. Story 20. I have shared this story over the years on the internet, but this is the right topic. More than 10 years ago, I had a toy soldier sitting on my wardrobe since we moved into that apartment. It was gifted to me by one of my former partners. I kept it because it sang "We Will Rock You," and I loved it. One night, suddenly, our dog started to growl and look at that corner. His fur was standing up, and he was ready to attack whatever he saw. I approached him and looked where he was looking. He had his eyes fixed on my toy soldier. I calmed him down and then thought about my former partner, wondering what he was up to since we had not talked in a few years. I searched his name on the internet and found his obituary. It turned out he had died a few days prior, around Valentine's Day. He loved me deeply, but it did not work out between us because he needed too much attention, and I was too tired to give it to him. I do not believe in a higher power or spirits of any kind, but I still cannot explain why my dog got startled by a toy that had been in the same spot forever. Story 21. One summer in college, I was quite broke and working a somewhat physical, dirty job. I kept ruining my work clothes at this job, and I was low on pairs of pants. Over breakfast one day, my roommate was telling me they wanted to go on a shopping trip that week and wondered if I would like to join. I said, "Yeah, I'm low on pants. I should probably buy some more, but money is so tight right now." Then we kept talking about other stuff and went to our jobs. That day at work, as it so happened, I ripped one of my last pairs of pants. I got home kind of grumpy. I came in. My roommate asked how work was, and I said, "Man, I ripped my pants. I barely have any left now." We chatted for a minute, and I went upstairs to my room. I went into my room, and my closet door was wide open. Everything on hangers had been pushed way to the sides, so there was a big open space, and there, sitting in the middle of my closet, was a brand new pair of pants. Tags on, everything. I went back downstairs and asked my roommate if they had bought me a pair of pants, which would have been very weird. They thought I was joking, so I told them to come up and take a look. They swore up and down they hadn't gotten them and didn't even know my size. I tried them on, perfect fit. They lasted me for a few years. I never figured out where they came from or how they got there, and I always referred to them as my magic pants. Story 22. One time, when I was about 15 years old, I was at my grandfather's house during the summer holidays. The whole family, including my parents, cousins, and their parents, had gone out. I was home alone in the evening and went to the washroom. As I came out and started walking towards the hallway, I heard the sound of anklets called "Pale" behind me, matching my pace. It only lasted for a few steps, but I was so creeped out that I did not dare to look back. I walked faster and then ran out of the house. The sound was so real and close, almost like someone was playing it in both my ears simultaneously, like earphones. But I knew something real was walking behind me until I was out of the house and locked the door from outside. There was also a back door on the left side of the house, so I sat in the front yard, overlooking both the front door and the side passage until everyone returned. I never told this experience to anyone. This was the only time it happened in that house. Story 23. I once was demonstrating shuffle to my dad on my iPod. It must have been nearly 20 years ago. Basically, you click this and it goes on shuffle mode, mixing up all your songs. So, the next song will be totally random and not something that is next in the list, like The Engineer. I hit next song. It's The Engineer. My library has about 2,000 songs. I turn and look at my dad with my mouth open in surprise. 1 in 2,000 to pick a random song is quite surprising. What's the next one then? He says with a smile. Super Trooper? Sheep. Super Trooper. Roughly 1 in 4 million. Pretty wild to just do offhand. Now, we always say Super Trooper if something unexpected or surprising happens. Story 24. The number of doors that I hear slamming when I am home alone is kind of scary. My roommates and I do not have any pets, and we usually do not have fans running, so nothing should be causing this to happen. It scares me every time. Story 25. It was after dinner, well past 1 a.m., when I stepped outside my house to brush my teeth. The night was quiet, almost still, until suddenly, thud, a ripe mango fell from the tall tree right in front of me. I hadn't even raised my toothbrush yet. Curious and a little amused, I peeled the mango on the spot and began eating it. Sweet, juicy, perfect. But as I reached the 6th bite, I felt something strange ripple through my body. My vision blurred. My strength vanished. Moments later, when I finally opened my eyes, I realized I was lying on the ground beneath the tree, my toothbrush still untouched. Story 26. This just happened yesterday. My son was in his basement bedroom. My husband was on the stairs coming up, and I was in my bedroom at the top of the stairs. My husband was talking to me, but not really loud, just normal conversation level because we are not that far apart. My son came running up asking what was wrong and what I needed. My husband looked at him like he was crazy. My son said he and his son both heard my husband call him to come upstairs. Now, my husband does do that a lot, just yell out for my son to come up, but not yesterday. I joked with him that it was fairies trying to lure him somewhere. Later in the evening, my husband went out to the store. When he came home, he opened the door, yelled a greeting, and then stayed outside chatting with a neighbor. There was no way I was going to leave my bedroom to make sure it was just my husband coming home. I called him instead, then told him I was worried it was the fairies again. Not that I really believe in fairies, I just don't take chances like that. Story 27. One night, I was sleeping and heard a familiar chime. I went to the living room and saw that Netflix was on, but no one was there, and my husband was asleep. Somehow, not only did my television turn on by itself, but Netflix also started playing. I was very scared that night. Story 28. One night at about 2 o'clock, music suddenly started playing in a friend's house. An old tune from a radio that had not been turned on for months. The owners checked. The cord was unplugged and there were no batteries inside. The music played for about a minute, then abruptly stopped. They searched the house but found nothing suspicious. Later, it turned out that there had been a strong magnetic storm that night, which may have caused interference in the old electronics. Story 29. The faucet on my hot water heater turned itself on and started spewing water everywhere. It was behind a closed door and had not been touched since we moved in. Story 30. I always had a terribly eerie feeling in my childhood home. I hated being there when my mother was gone, even if my older brother was home with me. My mother's room, closet, and the basement were areas I absolutely refused to be alone. I first started having insomnia in that house when I was about 5 or 6 years old and would sometimes lie in my mother's room with her because I was afraid to be alone at night. When I lay in her room, I would see the strangest shadows creeping along the ceiling. There were many instances of unexplainable behavior. Couple have stuck with me. One time, my mother was in the shower, and my brother and I were watching TV. We both heard someone yell. We assumed it was my mother, but as I walked to the bathroom door to see what she wanted, she yelled, "What?" and asked us what we said. Another time, my brother and I were home alone, standing in the kitchen with a clear view of the living room, when the TV remote flew a few feet across the room. The house was built in the mid-1800s, and my mother did many renovations over the years. While redoing my bedroom, she and my grandfather found baby clothes and toys inside the walls, which creeped me out so much. About 10 years ago, the house caught on fire. The damage was extensive, and the house was almost completely redone. I have not felt that eerie presence since the fire. Story 31. The lights in my living room sometimes flicker even when all the other lights in the house are working fine. I have had an electrician inspect it, but they could not determine the cause. Story 32. I was home with my former partner when we lived in Wales. We had a place in a secluded wooded area. Our cat started climbing the walls and became very frightened, but there was nothing there. She was so scared. The room also felt strange. Story 33. Several years ago, when I would get home, my apartment door kept having pieces of paper attached to it. I would take them down, but a week later, they would be right back up again. A couple of months later, the papers stopped appearing randomly. About 2 weeks after that, the sheriff came by one day, removed all of my belongings from the apartment, and changed the locks. It was the strangest thing. Story 34. I once heard my mother calling me from the kitchen. I yelled, "Coming!" Then she messaged me from work asking if I wanted lunch. I was home alone. Story 35. My brother had a magic box with a black wand that had a white edge on both ends. One of the tricks was to make the wand smaller. The white edge could slide on one side. We did that trick, and the white edge disappeared into my sister's sweater. She took the sweater off, but we couldn't find the white edge. We searched the floor, under the table, everywhere. We couldn't find it. A year later, the kitchen was renovated, and we looked under the freezer, but it was not there either. About 30 years later, we still have no idea where that item went. Story 36. I once lived on the 7th floor of an apartment building. My room had a balcony, and it was a pretty windy night, I admit. It was around midnight when suddenly something started banging loudly on the balcony doors. Of course, I freaked out, but when I managed to gather the courage to pull back the curtains, there was nothing there, and the knocking stopped after that. I still get chills when I think about it. Story 37. My hanging plants above the kitchen sink were all on the floor when I got home one day last year. The nails were still securely in the wall. None of the plant hangers had broken. The window over the sink was closed, so I cannot blame the wind. I do not have pets other than 2 snakes. They were securely in their homes. I cleaned them up and repotted them. The plants are all healthy again. Nokru. Story 38. I will set my vaporizer down, not be able to find it, and 5 to 10 minutes later it will fall out of the air into my lap. It has happened at least 6 times. Story 39. I woke up once to find all the kitchen cabinets wide open. Every single one. I live alone. I still decided not to stay inside and slept in my car that night. Story 40. I must admit I have been terrified of ghosts most of my life, while somehow being addicted to horror movies that definitely were not helping and, in fact, caused me to lose sleep many nights. Several years ago, in the middle of summer, I decided that I did not want my oscillating fan to point directly at me because if I woke up in the middle of the night and saw it suddenly oscillating, it would freak me out. So for about 2 or 3 years, the fan was set not to oscillate. Eventually, that irrational fear subsided, and I stopped thinking about it. Then one afternoon, I was lying in bed thinking about many things, and the fan, now set directly to point at me, was in my line of sight. Then it happened. The fan suddenly started oscillating on its own, unprompted. I did not want to give the ghost the satisfaction of watching me freak out. So after a couple of minutes, I got out of bed and set the fan back to point at me. Even then, I considered that it could be a mechanical issue, but I am still using the same fan today, and it has never happened again. Story 41. I was sitting in my family room watching television when I caught something moving in my peripheral vision to my right. I looked and saw it was a snake. To this day, I have no idea how that snake could have gotten into my house. From the direction it came, there were no holes in the walls or from the dryer vent. In fact, there are no holes anywhere it could have come in from. Story 42. Once, as a child, I was fast asleep and having a nightmare. I was suddenly woken by a woman's voice whispering urgently in my ear, "Brian, wake up." I am not Brian. I do not know anyone named Brian. There was no woman in my room. It was probably a hallucination of some kind, but I woke up from hearing it, so I have no idea what happened. Story 43. In the first apartment I rented, it was on the 4th floor of 8. One day, I went to sleep normally, and when I woke up, I had 60 liters of water in 3 20-liter buckets in the middle of the living room. I had a mini artificial lagoon in the center of my apartment. At first, I thought it might be a leak from the kitchen, but it was dry. The bathroom was dry as well, not a drop out of place. Near the windows, dry. Where I lived was a dry area, and it hadn't rained in about a month. The roof, normally nothing. I visited my neighbors upstairs and on the sides, and they didn't have any problems. The front door and the peephole, there was a guard under the door to prevent water from entering or leaving. I called the real estate agency to send someone to check. Nothing in that apartment indicated any leak or issues. Everything worked fine and was completely dry. A week later, the entire apartment had electrified walls. I called the real estate agency again. They sent someone, and the apartment was normal. A week later, I woke up with an invasion of bed bugs, 133 bites on my body that I could count. Covered in bites, I went to the real estate agency again. Nothing, as if nothing had happened. I just left that apartment. I can't explain what happened or why, but until today, I still wonder what happened in that 1 month. Every week it was something new. Story 44. We used to have an entrance to a crawl space when I was a kid. I could have sworn there was one, but all my relatives told me they did not know what I was talking about. Decades later, I was able to find that exact crawl space entrance. It seemed like my late grandfather boarded it up unintentionally while renovating the room where the entrance is located. There was nothing inside, though. I have already checked. Story 45. 7 or 8 years ago, my husband was out of town for work. The kids were about 3 and 8 years old at the time. We had a normal day. Picked the kids up after work, made dinner, bedtime, and so on. Everything was normal when I went to bed, and our security alarm was set before I went to sleep. The next morning, when I opened my bedroom door to wake the kids, I immediately heard a loud clicking noise. I am always a little uneasy when my husband is out of town, but this really frightened me. I went downstairs to investigate and found the knob to one of the gas stove burners was turned just enough to make that clicking noise it makes when lighting the burner. It was not on enough for gas to be coming out, thank God, just enough to make the clicking noise. I still cannot explain it. It was not like that when I went to bed. Our pets at the time were dachshunds, and they slept in my room. My kids never get up in the middle of the night and had no history of messing with the stove. I still think about it. I have a close friend who is a little spiritual, and she cleansed my house for me while I was at work that day. I guess that did the trick. It was years until I had another incident. Story 46. I was sitting on the toilet when I was young, and a sponge flew out of the cat's litter box, the fully closed one with a push door. No one believed me. I remember it clearly, terrifying. Story 47. We had an attic in my childhood home. We would always hear a faint tapping in the ceiling. We ignored it and thought it was probably the pipes. Over time, the tapping grew louder, as if it was an animal growing from a baby into a full-grown adult. We ignored it because no one was brave enough to go up there. We never found out what it was, we just moved out. Story 48. I once woke up to my living room television blaring static at 3 a.m. The remote was on the table. Nobody touched it, and the television had not even been turned on in weeks. Story 49. 2 days ago, I had 2 batteries for my Milwaukee tools and couldn't find one. I looked everywhere. I thought it might have been on my table because that was the last place I saw it. The table isn't big or cluttered. I searched the table again and again but found nothing. I was going nuts and looked everywhere once more. I wrote it off as lost. Then I walked into my kitchen, and it was right there on the table in the open, clear as day. Story 50. In high school, my older brother's electronics, alarm clock, television, computer, radio, etc., kept randomly turning on. I would go up to his room to turn them off, but they would turn on again. I was extremely busy with chores and getting very annoyed, so I unplugged everything. As soon as I got back downstairs, everything turned on and was blasting. At this point, I was really upset and didn't realize this was not normal, so I shouted upstairs to stop. I warned that if I came back up there, no one would be happy. Everything turned off. It took about a week or two for the reality to set in. I was home alone, and all of his unplugged electronics turned on at the same time. There were several strange moments at my house growing up. This was definitely the strangest. Story 51. Every now and then I'll be asleep in my bed with my dog in her bed on the floor, and I feel pressure on the bed as if she has her front paws up or someone just sat down. It has happened a few times, and each time I check, my dog is still under her blanket in her bed, and there is no one else there. I live alone. Story 52. Yesterday, my son asked me where his charger was because it was not plugged into its usual spot. I said he could use mine, but it also was not plugged in. About an hour later, I found my son's charger plugged into its usual spot and mine sitting on top of the extension board it is usually plugged into. I was still hoping for a reasonable explanation and not someone living in the roof, but it was only me, my children, and the cat at home. Story 53. We lived in a rental we were pretty certain was haunted. Small, inconsequential things would go missing and reappear in strange places. Items that nobody else had used or had reason to use got misplaced. One such item was one of my mum's earrings. She mentioned it and asked us to keep an eye out. I can do that. One day, I got back from university in the afternoon and found the earring, a dangly one, laid out perfectly on the ground in a high-traffic hallway. I'm talking about an area surrounded by 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a stairwell leading up to the main room. I'm supposed to believe that somehow, in the busiest part of the house, the earring fell off something and landed perfectly without any of us noticing it in the morning? Please. My mum also had a photo of an old lady show up in her phone gallery that she had never seen before. None of us recognized her, and it still gives me the creeps. She was like, "Hey, do you know who this is? I don't know where this photo came from." She showed it to me, and I burst into tears for no apparent reason, got a cold shiver, and yelled at her when she tried to show me again. Something about it just struck me, and my blood still curdles thinking about it. So weird. Story 54. A raccoon skull suddenly flew off the top of the television and across the room. Story 55. I once went to bed when I was around 10 or 11 years old. My bedroom door, bedroom window, and every upstairs window were closed, and they had been for hours as we had been out all day. We had just gotten home, eaten some food, and then headed to bed. As I opened my door, I immediately noticed a small black silhouette on my pillow. I turned on the light, and there on my pillow was a little pigeon resting on the bed. To this day, I have no idea how it got there since no window or door was open. I got it out after about 20 minutes of it flapping around and hitting the ceiling. I was very confused. Story 56. Una vez estaba sola en mi casa y se encendió la licuadora. Story 57. Apparently, a box of bullets arrived at my house. I overheard my parents saying that, but they never told me, so I never asked about it. Story 58. Where I live right now is a rental duplex house. At least 2 to 3 times a week, I hear someone walking on the stairs and banging them at night. It is not only me who has experienced this. Even my aunt heard her bedroom door knocking at night. She asked everyone during breakfast if anyone had knocked on the door at night. Everyone denied it. The strangest and most reassuring thing is that we have been hearing these sounds for the past 3 years, but it has caused no harm to us. Just noises in the night. Story 59. There was a white shape hanging out in one of the rooms. It was vaguely human-shaped and would vanish if you made direct eye contact with it. Could show up any time, day or night. It was probably a ghost-like entity. It hung around for a couple of years before just up and leaving, and I have not seen it in about 2 years. Story 60. In middle school, after my parents divorced, they made sure I had a cell phone. I had the Samsung Alias, which flipped like a flip phone and sideways, allowing me to have a full keyboard for texting. My mom had already left for work, and I was alone at home. I always left my phone next to me in bed. When I woke up, I went to shower and get ready. When I returned to my room, I searched for my phone. It was not in the usual spot. This was strange, but I kept searching. As a hormonal teenager, I started crying because I really needed to go to school, and I had to have my phone. I said out loud, "I do not know who you are or why you took it, but please give me my phone back. I need it." Not a moment later, I heard buzzing in the rhythm of my phone. I followed the sound to the bathroom and started opening drawers. In one of the drawers I had not even opened was my phone, sitting perfectly straight. Story 61. My grown sons have always said our house was haunted. I do not believe in spirits and ghosts, although I saw one when I was about 12 years old, and I just assume there is some scientific explanation for any unusual event, even if I do not know what it is. One evening about 20 years ago, my wife and I saw something in our family room that we still cannot explain. At the time, we had an ottoman stool just to the left of a large rear projection television. On top of the ottoman was a stack of neatly folded couch blankets. The blankets were stacked in the middle of the stool, not hanging over the side. While watching television one evening, the top blanket on the stack literally went from lying flat in the middle of the stool to flipping up in the air, turning over, and landing still neatly folded on the floor between the ottoman and the television. No one was standing near the ottoman, no pets were involved, and no drugs or alcohol had been or were being consumed. Both my wife and I saw this, so unless we both hallucinated the same thing, it actually happened. I still have no explanation. Story 62. This happened in my childhood home when I was probably a young teenager, around 13 to 15 years old. I was in my room, lying on my side in bed, about to go to sleep. The air conditioning was not on, nor the ceiling fan. I felt a distinct puff of air in my ear, as if someone was blowing into it. No one was there. I still have no idea what that could have been or what caused it. It never happened again. It did send a chill down my spine, though. Story 63. One time, a packet of spice disappeared. Then I found it in a place where it had never been before. Story 64. Sometimes I wake up and the remote controls to my television have been moved. I always lock my room with the key kept inside the keyhole, and the window is closed as well. There is no way anyone could have gotten in. My remote controls are so far away that I would notice if I woke up and moved them. Story 65. Last week, I took a bath and left the fan on for about 15 minutes to air out the condensation. When I went to turn the fan off, I noticed a puddle on the floor that honestly looked like urine. I do not have pets and definitely did not urinate on the floor. I thought it might have been some residue dripping from the fan, but I am not convinced because if it had dripped from the fan, the puddle would have been about half a meter away. The puddle was not directly under the fan. There was no residue on the fan or on the ceiling directly above the puddle. I honestly have no idea what it was, and it did not have any noticeable smell. Story 66. A bottle of wine I just opened disappeared and was never found again. Story 67. Fell asleep on the couch with a bag of marijuana and a pipe on the table. Woke up and they were gone. I was the only person home. Never found them. Story 68. Came home to find a single slice of cheese stuck to the bathroom mirror. No one has ever confessed. Story 69. I have smart sensors and battery-powered night lights that sense motion to turn on throughout my house. We were watching television when one of the night lights turned on in the front room on the opposite side of the house. I thought it was a fluke until I checked the smart sensors for motion and found that the one in that room and the one in the adjacent room triggered at the same time as the light. We had no pets at the time and have never had any signs of mice or pests in the house. That has not happened again in 5 years. We live next to a Civil War battlefield, but I have never experienced anything else unexplained. Story 70. Sitting in my room gaming one evening with my desk situated in a corner, and just behind me on my right is my window. I keep the blinds down at all times. I see in the corner of the room near the ceiling an orb of light, about half the size of my pinky nail, floating there, and moving somewhat. Thinking it is a neighbor or something, I check outside to see if they are shining lights. But no, the light is still there. I turn the light on. The light remains. I call my dad and brother upstairs to see it, and they confirm they see it. It then just flew off. Story 71. I lived in a house that was built in 1762. There was a friendly ghost who lived in my baby sister's room. When I was picking her up from her crib or at the changing table, I would often feel someone looking over my shoulder. The dining room below my sister's room also had strange electrical problems. During dinner, the light would slowly dim and then turn back on. Story 72. We've been in our house since 1980. In the basement, there is a large concrete slab about 1 foot tall and 3 feet square. It sits in a random spot in the basement. My children and I refer to it as the portal to hell. Nothing has happened, though, because we do not mess with it. Story 73. My now ex-wife and I had tickets to see Trans-Siberian Orchestra. On the day of the show, we placed them on the kitchen table and then got ready. When we came back, the tickets were gone. We looked all around the area surrounding the table but found nothing. We went to the arena to see if anything could be done, but had no luck. When we got home, the tickets were sitting exactly where we left them. That apartment was haunted. Story 74. We had just moved into the home we built. There were glowing spheres in my bedroom. I felt very calm. Story 75. One of those big plastic cups you get from a circus or sporting event fell off the dining room table. I was in the hall talking to my parents and heard it. Knowing there wasn't anyone else in the house, I went to check. It was on the floor, not near the table, but in the middle of the kitchen floor. We had no pets and have never had rodent intruders. I immediately checked the back door, and it was locked. I looked outside, and there was nothing there. No idea what that was about. Everyone I tell this to says it was a ghost. No, ghosts are not real. There is likely a very simple explanation, but I don't know what it is. One thing worth noting is that I had the stove and oven on, boiling water, cooking gravy, and baking a chicken. Also, the air conditioning was blasting because we like it very cold. I have thought maybe a temperature difference caused it, but again, I really have no idea. Story 76. The other night, I heard my toaster pop up, but there was nothing in it. Story 77. I think I saw my sister's doll move, and its eyes stared at me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.